Hi, I'm Representative Al Baldessaro, and this is Who's Looking Out for You. I'm here with my co-host, my good friend, Representative Jeanine.
Hello.
Welcome once again back to
Hi,
the
Al.
show. Anything new been happening with you?
Well, in the last half an hour, we taped a show, and now we're taping another one.
Now we're getting ready. We got a special guest. Why don't you introduce our special guest? Because being a Marine, he served in the Air Force, so I want to go easy on him.
Well,
I don't want to
I have
intimidate
3
him.
sons in the Air Force.
So you introduce our special guest here.
Well, Representative Steve Negron sits in front of me in the House, so every once in a while he'll turn around and make a face at me because he knows it'll make me laugh. And he's running for Congress. So
Yes, ma'am.
welcome, Steve.
Steve, welcome.
How you doing,
It's always
sir?
a pleasure.
Long range.
And thank you for your service.
You're welcome,
by
sir,
the
as
way.
you as well.
Yeah, even though you were in the Air Force, he's gonna.
Yeah,
That's right. Yeah,
I don't hold it against them. I mean, I have friends that served in the Air Force. I mean, we Marines need somebody carry our bags, like the Navy. But anyways,
The
hey,
Navy.
I'm glad to have you here. I mean, I heard he's running for Congress.
He is running for Congress.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah?
But I've known your wife a lot longer.
Longer,
I've
yes,
known-
right, you
yeah,
have.
because we were in
That's
the
right.
Federation together.
Yes, ma'am.
Why? Why are you running for Congress?
Well, it's funny that you asked that, Al. Is when I got elected into the House, one of the things that made the biggest impression on me is that, and you all have seen it in your committees and stuff, is that people will travel 2.5, 3 hours for 5 minutes of your time because they believe that they have a voice, that they have an opportunity to affect change. And I think when I look in the 2nd Congressional District, we've lost that with our current incumbent, Ann Custer. She doesn't listen to her constituents. She votes party line. And so as I've been traveling to 2nd Congressional, they need a voice. And that's what we're trying to do is fight for the people of New Hampshire and bring them a voice to the 2nd Congressional.
I mean, when you talk about the voice there, and I agree with you, people coming from all over the state. Just so people watching the show here in Londonderry, we're Congressional District 1, which is Cal Shea Porter, who's not running.
Yes, sir.
Your Congressional District 2, Ann Custer, and I'm going to tell you, she sits on the Veterans Affairs Committee. Never hear nothing.
That's
Anything
true.
that she's done for veterans.
Right.
And you, how many years did you put in
So
the Air
I've
Force?
put in 15 and retired with an early retirement package. I was an ICBM missile combat crew member in the height of the Cold War. I was the guy 90 feet underground,
Oh, wow.
pulling alerts, and I had 10 nuclear weapons that I
Were
was
you-
responsible for.
Were you in Minot?
No, but I've been to Minot, and they say, why not Minot? And freezing's the reason. But
Right. Ain't that
so,
the
yeah,
truth?
so I was at Whiteman
Yeah.
Air Force Base in Missouri before they came and bed down the B-2 Spirit bomber. So we were there.
Now, being you were in the House, what committee were you on?
So I was on the Election Law Committee,
Election Law.
which in this last term was pretty exciting. We had a lot of things that you all know about, and that we fought very hard for. Senate Bill 3 that got passed.
Tell
That
us
was
about
that was
Senate
Explain
Bill
that
3.
real
Yeah.
quick.
Right. So it all really gets down to we had this same-day voter registration, which really became an Achilles heel for us because a lot of times you could sign affidavits
Oh, yeah,
that allowed
and
you
lie.
and lie, and then cast a ballot, have the Secretary of State ratify the results, and then the election's over, and then we try to find out if really who you were you. And we found out that we had in the Secretary of State's office and the AG's office over 20,000 of these return postcards that we
Right.
couldn't validate.
And,
don't
and
live
the
here.
closest
They don't
the
live here.
elections
Right.
were, that makes you wonder that
It does,
a lot of
and
these
you know-
people that won fraudulently.
It is, and the Secretary of State told us at the Senate hearing for Senate Bill 3 was in 1974, the U.S. Senate race in New Hampshire was decided by 2 votes. So every vote matters.
That's right.
Every right vote matters. And, I look at it as somebody who's not allowed to vote in this state is then kind of nullifying my vote in a trunk. So Senate Bill 3 was very important to say, you know what, we're going to go ahead and try to capture that information. And you may still vote for that election, but the next time you come up, your name's off the scrolls, and therefore you won't be able to vote.
You know what gets me as a 22-year Marine active duty? I had to do an absentee ballot.
Yes, sir.
To my home of record. I could not vote in the state that I was
That's
at.
right.
So why are college students here in the state of New Hampshire that paid non-resident costs,
Right.
their parents are taking the tax break because they're paying, for
Right.
non-resident, why are they voting in our state during our elections?
We have a bill right now that came out of committee. It's about residency and domicile, and to try to narrow that. We're not saying. When I spoke at the well, we're not trying to prevent the vote. We're
Right.
trying to protect the vote.
Yes.
And that's really what
That's a good
we're
way of-
that
Yes.
we're
Remember
trying to
that. It's
do.
a great way of
and
looking at it.
and it is really. I was in the military too, and so my home state of record was always Texas. And so no matter where I went, and it's not that hard. The thing that used to get me is that, if it's so important for these college kids to vote, they have 364 other days to register. right? Not just get up the day that they think that there's an election and go down and do same-day registration.
Right.
So it does, you know, I know that there has been a lot of, you know, I think misinformation about really what happens. I mean, you and I have talked about it, Al, about things that happen. You look at, in my ward, Ward 5 in Nashua, we saw out-of-state plates that were there that weren't just onesies or twosies. So, you know, I think we have an opportunity to lock down and just make sure that whoever votes in this state is really of the right residency requirement.
Where in Texas are you?
Well, Fort Worth, Texas is where I went to college at Texas Christian University. My father retired out of the military at Carswell Air Force Base, which is in Fort Worth, Texas, in 1986. And so he just ended up staying there, and that became home for my dad, even though he's originally from Puerto Rico.
We lived in the center of Texas. And
San Antonio?
yeah, no, San Angelo.
Oh, San Angelo,
Yeah.
down at Goodfellow.
Yes, good
Yes,
fellow. Yeah,
absolutely.
that's where the spies go.
That's where the intelligence school is.
On
Yes.
my phone here, I have about 13, 14 pictures. In the last election, the president's election, there was an elderly woman that lives here in town, was across the street where they park their cars. And she sent me pictures of all these Massachusetts cars in Vermont and one New York, Maine, parked across the street, and they walked over here to vote. I stood at the corner with Representative Dave Lundgren and watched cars coming into Londonderry. And within an hour, if I didn't count 25 cars,
Right.
I counted more. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
So when
Yeah.
they say there's no
Voter
illegal,
fraud.
no
They keep
fraud,
saying it. It was
I
in the
disagree
news
with it.
again. There's no
You know?
voter fraud.
Right.
You know what?
I disagree.
That's right.
So just so you know, I just wanted to make sure I brought that out there. But anyway, what are you going to do in Congress? I mean, what are you looking to accomplish?
Sure. The first thing I think is being able to reduce the debt. You know, and I think that everybody has to be held accountable. I think we did some good things in the House where we actually passed a good budget. We pushed back on the first time that it came through. And I think that everybody realizes, I realize, is that we need to hold all those agencies accountable, even the Department of Defense, which is my bread and butter, because my small business, I do the Department of Defense work, is everybody needs to be held accountable. And, you know, and I run my small business, that we have to be accountable for every dime that we have. And I think the government right now has just run open loop for so long that they just think that, you know what, we can just keep on spending because nobody's going to stop us.
Right.
And I think we have to, and it's going to hurt, and people need to realize that it's going to hurt. You got to take the Band-Aid off, and everybody needs to share the pain. And I think everything's on the table. Entitlement programs are on the table.
Right.
The Department of Defense budget's on the table. Department of Energy, education, everything. Because I think there's a lot of waste there. I've seen it. You know, in my days as a government program manager in the Air Force side, and then in industry when I worked for like General Dynamics and Lockheed Martin, I knew that the government would pay me twice for some of the stuff that they wanted. And I think that we have to come down and say, you know what, no more. You get X amount of dollars, and that's what you have to go and execute your program for. And I think when you give those individuals just that right amount of money or that amount of money, they'll surprise you, and they'll actually do it.
So, Steve, this is your first time running for a major office.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, higher office. So tell us a little about yourself. Well, I know you're a family man because I know your wife.
Yes. So I'm a grandson of a Mexican immigrant that came across here in 1920 from a state called Michoacan, Mexico. And my father's from Puerto Rico. My grandmother was from Puerto Rico. My grandmother, a very accomplished woman. She was a chemist and a teacher. And the only work she could find in New York City was working in a candy factory. When my grandfather, he was actually naturalized and went back and was very excited about being a citizen, that he went back to his village to let them know that he had actually become a U.S. citizen. And unfortunately, he contracted typhoid, and died on his return back to New York.
Sad.
And then my grandmother became a seamstress to make a living for my mom and my aunt. And then, like most traditional Hispanic families, when one of the elders dies, the other one comes to live with us. So my grandmother lived with us for 12 years. When we were living in Spain, I lived in Spain from 1970 to 77.
Cool.
And in essence, grew up there, which was amazing. I speak the language
Were you in the
fluently.
Air
You don't
Force
have
in
an
Spain?
accent.
No, I was. My dad was in the Air Force, and
Oh,
so I was a
okay.
dependent. So I was 10 when we got there, and 17 when I left. And interesting, because 7 years in Europe was just an amazing way to grow up. And then we moved to Oklahoma.
But
Did the winds go swimming down the
Why is he
plane?
making that face? Because he had air conditioning, he had
And
carpet.
what are you
he had
talking
all
about?
all the nice life. His father was in the Air Force. It was a brain. We'd
yeah.
have dirt.
It was but it was a great way. I spoke the language, and we lived on the economy, and it was just a great experience.
Wait,
for me.
the language in Spain or the language in Oklahoma?
Well, the language in Oklahoma is different too.
Yes.
But it was the Spanish language when we lived in Spain was really a great way to grow up, and it really allowed me to experience the world in a different way, in different culture, that allowed me to make that kind of decision when we came back and I graduated from high school in Oklahoma and then went to college at Texas Christian University in Fort Worth, Texas, and there I entered the ROTC program and that got commissioned. And
That's
then
what my son's doing. Yeah.
Absolutely.
What rank were you when you
I
retired?
retired as an 04 as a major.
An 04?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yep.
When did you retire?
1998, June 1st,
okay, just
1998.
Oh, that was the year we moved
Yeah.
to New Hampshire.
Yeah.
Right. So what happened was in 98 and 99, there was a program called the Temporary Early Retirement Authority. So if you were in a non-critically manned career field,
I think
and that was a missile.
remember
Sarah
that.
Carson, I think
Yeah.
her and her husband both.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah,
So
took
we
the
were
early
closing down
retirement.
missile bases, right? The Berlin
Yes.
Wall was coming
Right.
down. And so we had 2 little ones, and my wife was pregnant with our third. And I said, you know, I'm done moving.
Right.
So let's go back home to Nashua, which is where we kept our home. And this is where the place where I wanted to put my roots down and establish my family. I mean, I was a transient my whole life. Never had a home, always lived on base housing. A great way to
brat.
grow up. I was
Right.
a
We
used to
brat.
call 'em
Great-
brats, yeah.
Absolutely.
And
Great
they
way to
probably
grow
still
up.
do.
Yes, sir.
You know?
I was telling somebody the other day on base housing, you had to have your grass cut such, you know, it had to be a
Right.
certain length, and they come by and it was too long, they ticket you, you know, so you learned away.
Don't
So
put
my
your
whole,
trash out or
Roger
put it
that,
in.
you bet.
Yeah.
I've been raised around patriots my whole life. That's all I've ever known about people giving, and you know, and it's always service before self in all the services. And then we retired in '98 and came back here and put our roots down and raised our 3 kids in Nashua. And now my oldest is on active duty right now with the Air Force Special Operations Command at Herbal Air Force Base in Florida. Our middle guy is finishing up at Nashua Community College. And then our youngest just finished her freshman year at Texas Christian University as a legacy, and then she's back home for the summer. So
You know, you gotta love the Air Force.
Yeah.
When I was in Desert Storm, right, when the Marines secured the airfield, Kuwait International, the tank, remember the big tank battle? I put a team together and flew in to run Kuwait International Airport. Once we secured the airfield and they were running the airfield off, we got the bladders on the ground to do the refueling. The Air Force flies in. They want to take over the airport. We said, no, this is the Marine Corps. This is our airport.
Yeah.
Then the next question was, are there any hotels around here? Yeah, this was the next question. Any hotels around here that aren't blown out that we can put our pilots?
You know, my sons are in the Air Force. 3.
Oh, they're gonna have
Yes.
the good life.
And my husband.
They're by a
veteran.
golf course. You know?
that's right. They
Yeah,
got the best
uh-huh.
golf course at
Yeah.
the Air Force bases.
Don't be
Yeah.
picking on my
Yeah,
boys.
I picked on Air Force.
I got a pen.
Now,
Poke you.
what are you looking to do as a congressman? I mean, what committees? Anything?
Well, certainly my experience both in the military and then being an acquisition officer for 15 of those years, and then into industry and working on the other side of the fence, and now my company does DoD acquisition. I'd love to get on the House Armed Services Committee. There's only, currently out of the 435 members in Congress, there are only 79 that are veterans. And so when you look at the House Armed Services Committee, there's a bunch of different subcommittees. There's a nuclear committee, which I think my background as a nuclear weapons officer, I think would lend to itself. And then my small business itself actually does ICBM work right now at Hill Air Force Base. So that's in my blood, and it's something I've done for over 30 years now. I like to sit on the HASC, and I like to be able to have a voice of a veteran on that committee to say, you know what, we can throw down the red flag and say that's not right. You know,
Right.
that's not the way it is. And I still have colleagues that are still in the service, still on active duty, that I can reach out to and talk to and get to know, you know, the real skinny about the stuff that's going on. And I could always talk to my son, who's a young airman
Right.
in the Air Force. So, you know, being able to sit on the HASC and bring that kind of experience, I think would be very fruitful to the committee.
So CD2,
Yes.
Second Congressional District, is huge. You have
It
to go
is.
all
Are
the
you
way.
CD2 or 1?
One.
Okay.
So you have to go all over the state, all the way up to the top,
Yes.
Canada, and all
Right.
the way down to your hometown,
Right.
or where you live now. What are the people asking you? What are the questions that are
Yeah,
coming up
that's
the most?
a great question, Jeanine. One of the things that we're finding out, and we've labeled it this great national insecurity, and it's everything from the national debt to immigration to military readiness to the opioid issue. And it doesn't matter whether it's all the way out west by Keene near Vermont or up to Coas County near Canada. Everybody, I think, still has this uneasiness. I'm like, when are we going to get a hold and really get a handle on some of the things that are really, they believe are affecting them? And immigration is one of them. You know, and I tell people, I said, I'm for immigration, but I'm for legal immigration. And that, you know, as the grandson of an immigrant, there's a right way to do it. We're a land of laws. We're not doing it, and we have to get back to it. And I agree with our president 100% when he says that we may have to lock it down for a while till we figure out who fundamentally is in our country. And to me, it's a bigger issue
It's a
than
no-brainer.
immigration. It's national
Right.
security.
Right, yeah.
I don't know, you know, we remember the days growing up, we knew everybody in our neighborhood, who they were, you know, when the lights were going on, you know, you have to be back home. Today it's different. Today we need to know what's your purpose in here, what are your desires or how long you're staying here. And one of the things that everybody wants to talk about is this path to citizenship. And I will tell you that being a citizen is a whole nother bucket. There's 185 ways to come into this country through visas. We need to figure out who's in this country, because some people can come in for education, for marriage. People can get a visa for marriage, for seasonal work. And then what happens when that visa is up? How do we track? Are they still here? Did they go back? And so we need to get a grasp on who's in our country. And before we can actually do that, we need to have accountability of what's everybody. And it's not that we're picking on anyone or anybody. It's just that the president has a responsibility to protect the citizens of the United States. And until I know who's here, I think it's an issue that he's going to be fighting for.
Well, you like myself that lived all around the world, I know damn well in many countries I've been to, these people want to kill Americans.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
There's no way about it.
Right.
You know what I mean? And the only ones that really understand that is military veterans that have been in many countries.
Right.
In Asia and
Absolutely.
and seen it in my own eyes.
Right.
I kiss the ground I walk on. You know what I mean? So that's why, like the president's always being attacked, in his immigration.
Right.
But they want to kill us.
They
That's
do.
the bottom line.
Right. And people think that it's just people crossing the border to get a better life.
No.
There's also opioid issue that's coming
right.
across. There's also terrorism.
Yeah.
People don't realize that there are factions in Central and South America that are friendly.
MS-13.
Absolutely. MS-13 is a perfect example that want to hurt and harm our way of life. And so we need to make sure that our number one priority is to protect American citizens, right? Not some of the other stuff that you see with sanctuary cities, which is another topic altogether. But and I think he's doing the right thing. I think we need to increase border security. I think we need to put more money down to the border control. I think we need to use technology that's down there, whether it's unmanned aerial vehicles or sensors. Once they start realizing that it's not a porous border the way it has been for the previous 8 years, they're going to think twice, or it's going to be harder before they can come into our country.
Second Amendment?
Absolutely. But it's bigger for me than just the Second Amendment. It's about the Bill of Rights. And people take the Second Amendment as that opportunity to chisel away at the very mortar of what our country was built on. And as I tell people, the founding fathers of New Hampshire refused to ratify the Constitution unless it contained a Bill of Rights. That's the bedrock of everything and who we are. And if you allow anyone or anybody to start chiseling away at that, then we're in for a fight, and a long fight. So I'm a stalwart on the second, the first, the fourth, the eighth, the 10th. The Bill of Rights is something that I will defend. I'll stand in front of it and defend it till I die. That's the oath we took when we took our oath to come into the service, to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And some of those things that I think that those individuals that are attacking our Bill of Rights are somebody that we need to hold them off at arm's length and say, not under my watch.
There was a coffee at Chris Ager's house last
Yes, ma'am.
week. I wanted to go to that. He told me they were going to hammer you. And
Right.
So when they ask you?
That was a great opportunity to go over to Mr. and Mrs. Ager's house, and they had some great Republicans that were there, real good activists. And really the intent is to just throw some bombs at you and help you better understand where your purpose is, what your message is. And it really was very beneficial to me. We talked about automatic weapons and bump stock. We talked about right to life. What would I do when it came to any kind of legislation? And I told them as a Catholic and as somebody who teaches confirmation in my church, I've been doing it for the last almost 18 years, is that life for me is from conception to natural death. And there's no
I agree.
off-ramps. Absolutely.
I agree.
Every single pro-life event I've gone to, I've seen Steve there.
It is.
We marched together
we
at
did.
the March for Life.
Yes.
I've been fighting for 12 years up there on life issues,
Right.
on murder.
Yes, sir.
On the baby.
Well, we
I've
did
taken-
well, right? The
Yeah,
fetal homicide
that's
bill
right, yeah.
to 20 weeks,
Yep.
right? But the fight's not over.
No, it's not, because that's the nose under the tent.
Roger
Yes.
that.
You know what
Yeah.
I mean? So it's a matter of time if we get the right Republicans in there,
Right.
that we're going to fix this. Here.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah,
there's
absolutely.
no doubt in my mind.
Yes.
But, and it's good to see that we have a uniform team
Right.
in there.
Right.
I'm
And I
like-
think it's getting momentum.
Right.
People kind of look at me like, I believe the right to life.
All over the country, America is becoming more pro-life, except New Hampshire.
Right.
And it's
I
so
don't
frustrating.
understand it there, But they'll protect the criminals. They'll
Yep.
want the criminals to
Oh,
get
yeah.
out early.
Right.
Murderers.
Right.
You know what
Gotta
I mean?
save the
It
murderers.
just makes no sense to me. They protect the illegals.
Right.
Instead of the unborn, or protect children. They'll fight us on school issues.
Cop
Right.
killers.
Choice.
Right.
Yeah, gotta get them out of jail.
You know what I mean? The things they fight us on are unbelievable. They think the government is the answer.
Right. Right.
And let me ask you, We have some issues here in New Hampshire. Money's not coming back to New Hampshire.
Right.
I'll use 93. That's a federal highway.
Right.
We bonded over $200 million there for 93. We have 2 Democrat senators, 2 congressmen. Will you try to bring some of that money that we're sending to taxes and the transportation bill to come back and help
Absolutely.
us
You know,
fix
you bet.
infrastructure?
I think infrastructure is not a federal issue; it's a state issue, right? But we need to give the states the money and the resources.
Right. But they're federal highway.
Right. I know,
You
but
know?
the states, and this is what I talk about, talking about smaller government, right? We live, and our legislature knows what's best for the state, not the people in Washington. So our current congressional delegation wants to bring the swamp water from Washington
Right.
to New Hampshire. And I'm saying we need to bring clear, crisp water, New Hampshire water, to Washington, and allow the states and fight for every federal dollar that we can to give back to the states to allow us to do whatever the state needs to do for infrastructure. I mean, we know what's on our highways. We know the kind of over-the-road traffic we have. I mean, we understand that kind of stuff. You can't do that from Washington. And they try to have this long arm of the government to try to tell us what we want. And I will fight, A, for dollars for the state, and to make sure you had every possible resources to be able to do what you guys need to do. And I think as a legislature who's been in there in the trenches with you guys, any one of you guys could pick up the phone and go, hey, Negron, you know, it doesn't have to be the governor. I mean, I am a representative of the people. You know, I'm their voice. First district, second, doesn't really matter. So I told the governor, put my name and speed dial on your phone, because right now he can't call the congressional delegation down in Washington for
Right.
any help. He's got to physically go down there and fight on behalf of the state.
Right.
And I told him, Negron goes down there, just hit N for Negron and speed dial. I'll pick it up, whatever you need. I'm there to work for the state.
Right.
That's
Are
my
you gonna
job.
come home on the weekends?
I'm going to absolutely. You know, one of the funny things I asked a former representative from the state, Representative Ginta, and I said, so what's the ops tempo? What's it like? And he goes, really, it's kind of predicated on what the speaker says, because the speaker kind of sets the tone. But when I was in, you had session Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Like, okay, that's when you voted on bills. And then you got to go home Friday and then come back Monday, come back. And I'm like, man, are you kidding me? That's unbelievable. That allows me to come back Friday, be with my family, and then do constituent services.
Right.
Right.
Do the same thing that we're doing now in the campaign. Go to towns, talk to people, because
Right.
problems and situations change over time, right? It isn't a one-time kind of deal. So to be able to come back
Yeah.
and have a Saturday and go to a town hall or go to a picnic in the summer, man, that would be unbelievable for me to be able to do that and come back.
Senator Ayotte always came home too.
Right.
Like
Absolutely.
Thursday
And you know,
nights, yeah.
St. A's did a poll, and some of the numbers were pretty striking when it comes to our current representative from CD2. Is that there was in the 20 percentile of the people that were polled hadn't even heard of Ann Custer, and she's a 3-term incumbent. That's 6
Right.
years.
Yeah. Are you going to make this her last stand?
I know.
Well, you know,
Are you going to make this?
I
her
gotta
last
say,
stand?
we said that you know,
Right.
the term Custer's last stand
Yeah.
was pretty catchy, but we didn't want to offend any Native Americans.
No,
right? 'Cause we didn't-
well, I'll say it.
Okay,
You
go
know,
ahead.
if I offend somebody, freedom of speech is a beautiful thing. Is this going to be her last
Yes,
stand?
it is going to be her last stand.
Okay.
Absolutely.
You know,
Yeah.
And
in
you know,
our-
we tell people that we miss her, and we want to bring her home.
Right.
You know, just come
Let
back.
me ask you another thing that we asked another candidate there. Obamacare. It's costing, and I know Jeanine told me her story about $100 every time.
Oh,
she
it's
goes
over
to the
$100.
doctor.
A doctor
But the
visit.
deductibles, some of the things I keep hearing from constituents here in Londonderry, $10,000, $12,000, you know, that they have to pay before the insurance even kicks in.
Right.
Are you all for repealing
Repeal
and
it.
getting rid of it?
Repeal it. And here's what you have to do, Al, is that you have to, I look at it as a marketplace, right? So when you want to go and buy a car, as an example, you go and you comparative shop, and you go to different dealers. Depending, you know, it doesn't necessarily have to be just a red car. If your only choice was a red car or a blue car, you're kind of stuck. And that's where we are right now with Obamacare. You know, we have really little to no choice of what it is. But if I can go to a big car, small car, medium car, red, silver, white, blue, you as a consumer then have the power to decide what's best for you.
Right.
And, you know, we've talked to some folks out of Portsmouth that they say, if you could determine, say, for example, an MRI, when you go to a hospital or an organization and you get your explanation of benefits, you see these big numbers and you can't find out how much that MRI cost you because it's all buried. It's called a wrap rate, right? So that means the money that I have to cost to make sure my floors are polished, that I've got a parking garage attendant, all that costs get wrapped up into the rate that the hospital has to recover, right? It's not for free.
Right.
But if I can tell you, you can get the same procedure at a place called Dairy Imaging, for example, for $500, probably the same equipment and probably the same technicians, right? Versus $3,500 at a hospital. If you're a consumer, where would you go? We need to empower the individuals just like we do everything else. So we have to bring down these barriers to allow cross-state. And I know there's some issues about, you know, having insurers come into the state, but you know what? I'd like to have 8 or 9, 10 options.
Bring the cost down.
You betcha, absolutely. I'm a huge believer in the free market, you know, and even people say, well, you can't do that. Yes, you can.
Yeah, you can.
We do it in
It
health,
works.
in life insurance.
You know, that was one of the things I threw into the Trump plan and veterans was competition within the VA and the civilian community.
betcha.
Because if the VA is going to do a bad job, veterans go to the civilian
You bet.
community.
You bet.
You know,
And
they'll
that'll
be covered.
entice the VA,
That's
right? They don't
to-
want to lose it. You bet.
If they want to stay in business, they'll be enticed to do better.
Absolutely.
And buy
Absolutely.
new equipment and make sure that they got top notch.
That's
you
right.
know.
That's right. And people are just afraid to make those decisions. People are even afraid to have that kind of discussion because they think that, oh my God, that's special, that's sacrosanct. You can't be touching it. I'm like, you know what? Everything's on the table. For veterans, everything's on the table. There are some people that want to just have a VA hospital in Manchester. I said, it's not about brick and mortar. It's about care. It's about where a veteran, where he or she wants to go. We shouldn't limit them. We shouldn't, I mean, you know what? They raised their hand in an all-volunteer, you've heard me say this, right?
Oh, yeah.
The draft went away in '73. So everybody in the military today is an all-volunteer force. And so if we don't treat our veterans today, the ones that are coming back, the right way, in 10 to 15 years, when this young kid who's now 8, and now he's 18, and he goes to a friend of his, an uncle, and he goes, hey, how did they treat you? He goes, well, they didn't treat me well, you know? You're going to have a trouble just making sure we have the right force.
Now, I know we're getting closer to time here. Do you know how people can get in touch with this guy?
Well, I just call him on the phone,
You
but
just call him? How do
people that don't know you, how do they
Sure.
get?
No,
So
they
my
don't know
website
you.
is www.negron and the number 4 congress.com. I'll give you my number at 417-8900. You can
Okay.
always call me. I'll pick up the phone and answer your questions because it's not my seat that I'm running for. It's your seat, and that's really the way I look at it.
Wow, that's unbelievable there, huh? And, you know, it was an honor serving with you at the house there, and it
Yes,
was a
sir.
shame to see you go. And we actually were losing a lot at the house.
I know.
There. It's
Yeah.
a shame.
I know.
A lot of good conservatives.
But I love to come back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And visit,
Come
right?
back and visit.
Yeah, you come back.
You can stand up and wave, and I'll be in the gallery.
You're not going to be like Custer and, you know, never come back
Oh,
at
are you
all.
kidding me?
Because I don't think anyone's seen her.
No, we've established a bond. We've established a friendship. And those, to me, as a guy who grew up in military patches all over, that bond is something that's really hard to break. And so we're really looking forward to establishing that. And I meant it when I said it. You know, call me up. Anything.
Steve, it's been a pleasure.
Al,
and,
thank you so much.
You know, thank you once again for your service. And Jeanine, I'll tell you, this is what, our 4th show now, or 5th? I lost count now.
I lost count too.
Isn't it
but
great to be back
It
again?
is. It is great to be
Huh?
back. Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. So, well, once again, this is Who's Looking Out for You. We'll be back next week with new, people coming in, huh? Anyone real quick?
I didn't bring the book with me, but
That's
yes,
fine.
we have Jane Cormier. She's coming up on a show, and
Thank you.
other people too.